Hey friends, it's Elle here. A long time no see. I know it's been probably since last year. I'm so sorry, but it's been a really busy semester. I don't know about for you guys, but in the process of getting the students started to getting them to finishing first semester and them settled in for second semester, it has been a very busy season for me, so I apologize for not having made a lot of videos. This school year I am working with mostly LTEL or ELD students, so we're in LPAC testing season. For us, it's starting next week, so for those of you that are also ELD teachers, you know how time consuming that can be, but that is not the point of this video. The point of this video is I wanted to talk about something that maybe you could see it on my face. Maybe you have been currently going through it yourself. And that is this term that we hear often called teacher burnout. So for me, going into a full second year of being a full-time teacher, 5 years working with students in other capacities, I would say from my own personal experience, teacher burnout is something that I have struggled with at least every single school year. And I know sometimes that it's something that when it hits you, you kind of find yourself asking that question, is it that maybe teaching isn't for me? Is it that I don't manage my stress well? Or is it something that I can avoid? And mind you, I have not been teaching in the profession for 10 plus years yet, so I can't honestly say if teacher burnout is something that a person can avoid. But sometimes I do think that we can mix it up with thinking that we aren't called to teach when the reality is it's something that will sneak up on a person. It's oftentimes when they least expect it. So if you've been feeling really tired and highly stressed and exhausted and wondering if the profession is something that you were carved out to be in, please listen to this video because this might be something that can help you to be able to figure out where you might be. So what is teacher burnout? I'm going to give you L's definition, and by all means feel free to look it up because it is a topic that is starting to gain more attention than I think it did in years past. So teacher burnout is when you experience a lot of stress, okay? Not that teaching in general isn't going to feel stressful, because everybody knows, especially when you're working with 20 plus students, it's going to be stressful, okay? But it's a type of stress that does not alleviate itself right away. So you might have your cup of wine at the end of the day and you feel like you need another one the next day. It's a type of stress where, at least for me, it makes me super tired and then I become unproductive. I find myself sleeping a lot, sometimes becoming more irritable than I normally would be, shorter tempered than I would be. In my experience, it's impacted my eating habits. So I might start the year off planning out my meals, eating very healthily, and then when teacher burnout starts to kick in, I notice that I'm not eating as healthily. I might be running to the store at the last minute to grab a microwave pizza, or not drinking as much water, or relying so heavily on caffeine that it's no longer working for me because my body, it's just not processing it like it would normally. Teacher burnout can also look like sleepless nights. So you notice how sometimes there's a little bit of anxiety when you're starting the school year, that night before you meet the students. So you might sleep well, you might not sleep well. But teacher burnout is when you've already got to know the kids, you've already established those norms in your classroom, but you're noticing you're not getting good sleep. You're tossing and turning a lot, or you wake up and you've had a good 6, maybe 8 hours of sleep and you feel just as tired as you did when you laid down to go to sleep. Teacher burnout can also look like not being motivated to continue doing your hobbies. So for me, when I start to feel burnt out, I notice that I have a hard time keeping up my social medias. I have a hard time being able to schedule time to see my friends. I have done better this year, but when I was really first getting started, it was very, very difficult to manage that time to be able to still be connected with my community. And then add grad school to that, and then you find yourself even more pressed for time than you would have otherwise. And that also factors into teacher burnout. So if you've experienced any of these things that I'm talking about, you have experienced teacher burnout. I personally think that it creeps up for a lot of people around October of fall semester and at any point during second semester. Why? Because the nature of our jobs are just very demanding. And unfortunately, not a lot of people outside of our professions really understand the mental stress that teachers go through having to make 50,000 split-second decisions throughout the day. And if you're secondary teachers, helping 100 to 200 students every day with their own unique learning needs, having to adjust your teaching, adjust your approach, re-explain things, incorporate different things. It's a type of mental load that I think the only profession that's closest to it that could understand would be doctors. That's me personally speaking. I'm just sharing my own personal opinion on the matter. A lot of people outside of education simply do not understand how exhausting it can be. And when we don't have the opportunity to rejuvenate ourselves, to sit back, to relax, to do things that build us up, I think that's what causes teacher burnout to hit harder and to hit sooner, because we're constantly pouring from ourselves to give into the needs of our students, to help our fellow co-workers, to support the needs of our admins, to be a positive figure for our parents of our students, our communities. But how often do we get poured back into? And I think that is the leading cause behind a lot of teacher burnout, because it's almost like if you have a cup, okay, this cup is empty, but let's just say I had a full cup of water in this cup, and I'm gonna pour it into this bottle right here. Eventually what's gonna happen is the more I pour from this cup, this bottle will get full, relatively speaking, but if there's nothing to refill this cup is gonna be empty. And eventually it's going to get to the point where there is nothing else to pour into this bottle. And that's us teachers. You see, we are the cups that have the water, and we pour into our students, we pour into our parents, we pour into our admins, we pour into our colleagues. But if we don't have a source that is pouring into us, we will eventually run dry, we will run empty. When that happens, welcome to teacher burnout, okay? So for a lot of you, maybe you've been thinking that I'm not cut out to be a teacher, it's too stressful, it's too overwhelming, and that can definitely be a thing. I think every teacher has experienced that. I don't think there's any teacher that at any point has not felt overwhelmed and exhausted and ready to quit, because I definitely can recall many times where I felt that way. But I think that's also code for teacher burnout. So if you're experiencing this, I just want to say, first of all, you are not alone in this journey. From the veteran teachers that I personally know, they have shared with me many, many times where they've had breakdowns, where they've cried in their classrooms, where they had to try to figure out coping strategies just to make it through the day. And I know even myself personally, I have had to sometimes self-soothe during my prep time to keep myself calm and collected. So I just want to say that if this is you, if you've been feeling overwhelmed, if you've been feeling exhausted, just know that you are not alone. This is part of the struggle, part of the battle of what being a teacher is, what being an educator is. And recognize that other people can feel what you feel and that it's okay to feel that way. I think a lot of times we come out of our teacher preparation programs thinking that if we feel like giving an easy lesson because we're too tired to create a solid lesson, that we're failing as teachers, and that's just not true. I know the textbooks always present an idealistic approach to teaching and instruction, but I think one thing the textbooks often forget is that at the end of the day, we are human. We can only produce so much if we're not being poured into. We have our limits. We're not going to be perfect. We're not going to always have high engagement. We're not going to always have every kid in our classroom off their cell phones paying attention. We're not going to always have lessons that if an admin were to walk in, they'd give us a huge kudos and tell us how amazing we are. It just doesn't happen 24/7, okay? So if you've been beating yourself up saying, well, I feel like my classroom management sucks, or I feel like my lesson planning sucks, please don't. Because the teachers that you see that have it all together, trust me, they have a background story. And the background story is probably going to look more like you than not, okay? I haven't heard or met or seen any teacher that hasn't had to go through the struggles of learning how to survive in this field and learning how to take the pains they've experienced and grow from it. So by all means, please don't beat yourself up if you don't feel like you're just as good as the teacher next door, because you don't know what the teacher next door might be doing to look as good as they do, because everybody cuts corners, okay? People use teacher pay teachers. I'm just saying. So I just want to say all this to say, and I want to keep this video as short as possible. If you're experiencing teacher burnout, if you feel that your self-worth as an educator is not as high as it was when you first started, recognize that if it wasn't in your heart to love and care for students, you wouldn't be a good teacher. Being a good teacher is more than just having great lessons and having great classroom management and not ever having complaints. It's not. Being a good teacher is, at the end of the day, when you're tired, when you're stressed out, when you're not getting enough sleep, when you're not eating as healthy as you should, you never give up on your kids. That's what qualifies a good teacher. It's not being perfect in following all the latest pedagogy. It's not being perfect in having high engagement. It's not. It's at the end of the day, do your students know that you care about them, whether you're having a good day or a bad day? And if at the end of the day, you can honestly say that your students know that you have their back and that you're doing the best that you can, then you're doing your job. So that's all I wanted to say. In the next video, I do want to share some strategies on making it through teacher burnout and how to lower the impact of teacher burnout. So do stay tuned for that. And just remember, we are all here for each other. We are here for you. So don't give up. You got this.